Before smartphones and social media, people created hobbies so bizarre they sound like complete fiction today. Some were simple childhood obsessions, while others became elaborate underground movements. So, how did boredom lead people to have these weird hobbies? Let's start with perhaps the most ridiculous one. Hamster dancing clubs emerged in the late 1990s as youth clubs organized small-scale dancing hamster contests. Participants choreographed routines using toy hamsters or dressed up live ones, creating performances inspired by novelty songs like Hamster Dance and early online culture. Training hamsters to dance was like directing the world's tiniest and least cooperative Broadway cast. Participants had to work around their performers' tendency to ignore choreography entirely and do whatever hamsters naturally wanted to do instead. Events awarded prizes for creativity, music timing, and hamster costume design. Some competitions featured multiple categories, allowing both live hamster performances and creative toy hamster routines to compete separately. The hobby basically combined pet ownership, fashion design, and choreography into one chaotic package that somehow made perfect sense to 90s kids. Winners gained local recognition within youth clubs and sometimes received small trophies acknowledging their unique performance skills. The trend faded as internet culture evolved, but it represented an early example of online culture influencing offline activities. Though hamster dancing required live performers, other hobbies focused on manipulating technology itself. Phone phreaking became popular among tech-savvy teens during the 1980s and early 90s. This hobby involved manipulating telephone tones and signals to gain free access to long-distance calls, turning the phone system into a playground for curious young hackers. Participants used homemade devices like blue boxes to bypass phone company systems by generating specific audio frequencies. Phone phreaking was basically hacking before hacking was cool. Except instead of computers, you were outsmarting the phone company with whistles and tone generators. The technical knowledge required was substantial, with practitioners learning about telephone switching systems and signal manipulation. The social aspect was significant, with phone phreakers sharing techniques through underground newsletters and word-of-mouth networks. It attracted people who enjoyed solving puzzles, except the puzzle was how to make free phone calls, and the stakes involved potential legal trouble. The hobby eventually declined due to digital switching technology and increased phone security measures. However, phone phreaking established many principles that later influenced computer hacking culture. While phone phreaking dealt with invisible signals, other hobbies created very visible memorials. Tamagotchi graveyards appeared in the late 1990s as kids created backyard burial plots for their dead virtual pets. These miniature cemeteries featured actual burials of Tamagotchi devices, complete with handwritten eulogies and toy accessories placed as grave offerings. Children approached these virtual pet deaths with surprising seriousness, often inviting friends to mini funerals or memorial services. Burying electronic pets was probably the first time kids experienced grief over something that never actually existed in the first place. The ritual aspects were elaborate, with participants writing detailed eulogies that described their Tamagotchi's personality and cause of death. Some graves included flowers, small toys, or drawings representing the deceased virtual pet's interests. These graveyards were more carefully maintained than some actual pet cemeteries, which says something about the emotional investment in digital creatures. The practice was documented in early internet forums where participants shared photos and discussed proper burial protocols. The phenomenon reflected broader questions about digital relationships that would become increasingly relevant as technology advanced. Not all 90s hobbies involved such emotional investment, though. PUG collecting and battling dominated playgrounds during the early to mid-1990s. This hobby used cardboard discs featuring brand logos, cartoons, holograms, and local designs, with players using heavier slammers to win stacks from opponents in competitive games. The gameplay was deceptively simple, but required skill and strategy. Players stacked their pogs face down, then took turns throwing slammers to flip as many discs as possible. Pog battles were basically gambling for elementary school kids, except instead of money, you were betting milk cap collectibles. Pogs featured an incredible variety of designs, from cartoon characters to holographic patterns to local business advertisements. Rare or imported Pogs were considered extremely valuable within school trading circles, leading to complex bartering systems and underground markets. The competitive aspect was intense, with some players developing specialized slammer techniques and collecting strategies. Schools often banned piags due to fights over valuable pieces and the gambling-like behavior they encouraged among students. The hobby created an entire playground economy where kids learned about supply and demand, market value, and competitive strategy, while teachers tried to confiscate their business materials. Trading sessions during lunch breaks resembled miniature stock exchanges with rapid negotiations and deal-making. The POG craze eventually faded as quickly as it had appeared, but it demonstrated how simple games could create complex social and economic systems among children. While POGs connected kids locally, other hobbies reached across the globe. Pen pal chain letters circulated widely during the 1980s and early 90s through the postal system. Participants mailed letters to strangers worldwide in exchange for replies, creating international networks of correspondence that connected people across continents and cultures. Chain letters included jokes, recipes, stickers, personal stories, and sometimes small gifts that represented the sender's hometown or culture. Pen pal chains were basically social media before the internet, except instead of instant messages, you waited weeks for replies and actually had to write legibly. Some chains lasted for years and were documented in niche magazines that tracked successful correspondence networks and provided tips for maintaining long-term pen pal relationships. The commitment required was substantial, with dedicated participants maintaining correspondence with dozens of people simultaneously. The international aspect was particularly valuable, allowing participants to learn about different cultures, practice foreign languages, and develop friendships with people they would never meet in person. Letters often included photographs, local newspapers, or cultural artifacts that provided windows into distant places. The Postal Service probably made more money from pen pal chains than from actual business correspondence, considering how many teenagers were mailing letters to random addresses worldwide. Some participants kept detailed records of their correspondence networks, tracking which chains were most successful and which countries provided the most interesting pen pals. Technology eventually made pen pal chains obsolete, but they represented an important early form of global social networking that predated digital communication. But other hobbies used radio waves to create invisible communities. CB radio roleplay groups flourished during the 1980s, using citizens' band radio for much more than trucker communication. Hobbyists formed elaborate roleplay groups with call signs, nicknames, and fake missions that transformed radio communication into interactive entertainment. Participants simulated police dispatches, spy games, military operations, and other scenarios that required coordination between multiple operators across different locations. CB radio roleplay was like playing pretend, except your playmates might be hundreds of miles away, and you never knew if they were actually who they claimed to be. Communities coordinated through specific CB channels and printed newsletters that provided background information for ongoing storylines and character development. Some groups maintained complex fictional universes with detailed histories and interconnected plotlines that evolved over months or years. The technical aspects were significant, with participants learning radio protocols, signal propagation, and communication techniques that enhanced their roleplay experiences. Advanced operators use specialized equipment to improve their range and signal quality for better character immersion. The hobby attracted people who enjoyed creative writing and acting, but wanted to do it anonymously over radio waves instead of on stage. Some roleplay groups developed such sophisticated storylines that they resembled radio dramas with multiple participants contributing to ongoing narratives. The decline of CB radio usage and the rise of internet communication eventually reduced participation in these roleplay communities, but they demonstrated the creative potential of voice-only communication. While CB radio reached distant audiences, other hobbies focused on creating something tangible to share. DIY zine publishing exploded among teens and young adults during the late 80s and 90s. Participants created handmade magazines covering topics like punk music, social commentary, poetry, conspiracy theories, and personal experiences that mainstream media ignored or dismissed. Zines were produced using Xerox machines and distributed through mail networks or hand-to-hand trading at concerts, record stores, and college campuses. Creating zines was like having your own personal newspaper, except your circulation was 20 copies and your printing press was whatever copy machine you could sneak into. The content was remarkably diverse, ranging from music reviews and political manifestos to personal stories and experimental art. Production values varied wildly, with some zines featuring professional quality layouts, while others embraced deliberately crude aesthetics that emphasized authenticity over polish. The scene thrived in underground music communities, LGBTQ+ circles, and college towns where alternative viewpoints found receptive audiences. Trading networks developed that allowed zine creators to exchange publications with others across the country and internationally. Zine publishers were basically independent media moguls operating on photocopier budgets, which required impressive creativity and determination. Distribution often involved leaving stacks at sympathetic businesses or mailing copies to addresses found in other zines, creating informal networks that connected like-minded individuals. The internet eventually provided easier publishing platforms, but zines established important precedents for independent media and self-expression that influenced later digital culture. But technology wasn't just used for communication, though. Desktop icon arranging became a hobbyist pursuit during the 1990s as Windows PC users spent considerable time designing art using desktop icons. Arrangements included pixel-like images, smiley faces, custom themes, and elaborate patterns that transformed computer desktops into digital canvases. Practitioners created detailed guides explaining how to position folders and shortcuts to achieve specific visual effects, treating desktop organization as both functional design and artistic expression. Desktop icon art was probably the only hobby where being obsessively organized about file placement was actually considered creative. The technical limitations of early Windows systems made this particularly challenging, requiring users to work within strict grid patterns and limited icon options. Creative solutions involved using different folder types, custom icons, and careful spacing to create recognizable images or abstract designs. Some arrangements were shared through early internet forums and computing magazines, where enthusiasts exchanged screenshots and techniques for achieving different visual effects. The hobby attracted people who enjoyed both computer customization and visual design challenges. It represented the digital equivalent of rearranging furniture, except your furniture was file folders and your room was a computer screen. Advanced practitioners developed signature styles and became known within online communities for particular types of desktop artwork. The practice declined as operating systems became more sophisticated and desktop customization options expanded, but it demonstrated early interest in personalizing digital environments. While some people decorated their computers, others competed on them. Keyboard typing speed challenges dominated schools and community centers during the late 80s and 90s. Participants competed for fastest and most accurate typing on QWERTY keyboards, with speed tracked in words per minute using specialized software or printed scripts. Competitions were surprisingly intense, with serious participants practicing daily to improve their technique and speed. Typing contests were basically the Olympics for people whose superpower was hitting keys really fast without looking. Winners sometimes received small trophies or local newspaper mentions, bringing brief fame to champions of this practical skill. Schools often incorporated typing challenges into computer classes, making keyboarding proficiency both educational requirement and competitive sport. The social dynamics were interesting, with typing speed becoming a marker of technological sophistication and future career potential. Fast typists gained respect from peers and teachers who recognized the growing importance of computer skills. The competitions attracted perfectionists who found satisfaction in measurable improvement and people who enjoyed showing off technical skills in front of audiences. Some participants developed distinctive typing styles or specialized in particular types of text that played to their strengths. Modern computing made typing speed less critical, but these competitions represented an important transitional period when keyboard proficiency was becoming essential for academic and professional success. But technology enabled other forms of mischief too. Prank call competitions thrived among teens during the 1980s and early 90s before caller ID became widespread. Friends challenged each other to make the funniest or longest prank calls, turning telephone mischief into organized entertainment. Some participants recorded their calls and traded cassette tapes with others, creating underground collections of successful pranks and failed attempts. Prank calling was like stand-up comedy, except Your audience couldn't see you and might hang up at any moment. The creativity involved was substantial, with successful prank callers developing character voices, elaborate scenarios, and improvisational skills that kept targets engaged. Competition arose around different categories like longest call duration, most creative premise, or best character performance. The hobby required careful timing and location selection, as participants needed access to phones during periods when they wouldn't be interrupted by parents or other authority figures. It attracted people who enjoyed performance and improvisation but preferred anonymous audiences who couldn't identify them later. Technology eventually made prank calling much riskier and less successful, as caller ID and call blocking features eliminated the anonymity that made the hobby possible. Legal changes also increased penalties for telephone harassment. The decline of prank calling coincided with the rise of internet-based entertainment that provided safer outlets for creative mischief and performance. While prank callers created temporary entertainment, other collectors focused on permanent acquisitions. VHS cover collecting attracted hobbyists during the 80s and 90s who focused on rare or bizarre movie covers rather than the films themselves. Popular among horror, sci-fi, and animation fans, collectors sought covers with banned artwork, printing errors, or unique regional variations. The hunt for unusual covers became as important as watching the movies, with collectors visiting video stores, flea markets, and garage sales in search of printing mistakes or limited edition artwork. VHS cover collecting was like stamp collecting, except instead of commemorating historical events, you were preserving terrible movie poster art. Covers featuring banned artwork were particularly prized, especially those that had been censored or recalled due to content concerns. Regional variations showed interesting cultural differences, with foreign releases often featuring dramatically different artistic interpretations of the same films. Some collectors maintained their cover collections even after the tapes wore out, treating the packaging as artwork worthy of preservation independent of the content. Trading networks developed that allowed specialists to exchange duplicates and rare finds. The hobby attracted people who appreciated graphic design, exploitation cinema, and the unintentional comedy of low-budget movie marketing. Documentation became important, with serious collectors cataloging variations and maintaining databases of different releases and regional differences. The transition to DVD eliminated the large format artwork that made VHS covers appealing, effectively ending this particular collecting specialty. Physical collecting gave way to more active pursuits. Rollerblade obstacle design became popular among kids and teens during the 1990s as inline skating gained mainstream acceptance. Participants built homemade obstacle courses using milk crates, plywood, traffic cones, curbs, and other improvised materials in parking lots and alleys. Course construction required engineering creativity and safety considerations, as builders had to create challenging obstacles that could be navigated safely at high speeds. Building rollerblade courses was like creating theme park rides, except your budget was whatever you could find in garage sales and construction dumpsters. Improvised skate contests developed around these courses, with local skaters competing in tricks, speed runs, and style competitions that showcased both skating ability and course design quality. The best course builders gained recognition within skating communities for their creative and challenging designs. Layouts were shared through early message boards and VHS tapes that documented successful course designs and skating techniques. Some groups developed signature obstacles or course themes that became associated with particular locations or skating crews. The hobby combined architecture, athletics, and urban exploration in ways that often concerned parents and property owners. Safety was always a concern, as participants balanced the desire for challenging obstacles with the need to avoid serious injuries. Commercial skate parks eventually provided safer alternatives, but DIY obstacle design represented an important period of grassroots skating culture and creative problem solving. But creative building projects weren't limited to physical spaces. Internet greeting card hacking emerged as a late 90s hobby involving the alteration of HTML-based e-cards to prank friends and family. Users embedded unexpected music, fake alerts, autoplay messages, and other surprises into seemingly innocent digital greeting cards. Web-based card services like Blue Mountain and 123 greetings were commonly targeted because their simple HTML structure made modification relatively easy for users with basic web knowledge. Hacking greeting cards was like gift wrapping a surprise, except the surprise was usually an annoying song that played at maximum volume. The technical knowledge required was minimal compared to serious hacking, making this accessible to teenagers with basic HTML skills and dial-up internet access. Modifications ranged from harmless pranks to more elaborate fake virus warnings and system alerts. Sharing happened within small friend circles who appreciated the humor and technical creativity involved in successful card modifications. The pranks were generally harmless, but required recipients to have a sense of humor about being tricked. The hobby attracted people who enjoyed practical jokes, but wanted to add a technical element that demonstrated their computer skills. Some participants developed signature modification techniques or specialized in particular types of fake alerts. Improved web security and more sophisticated greeting card platforms eventually made these modifications much more difficult, ending this particular form of digital mischief. While some collected digital pranks, others focused on tiny physical objects. Collectible eraser swapping dominated elementary school social circles during the early 90s. Erasers shaped like animals, food, cartoon characters, and other novelty designs were traded at school with the intensity of a miniature stock market. Rare or imported erasers were considered extremely valuable within trading circles, with some students developing sophisticated valuation systems based on scarcity, condition, and popular demand. Eraser trading was like currency exchange, except the currency was tiny rubber objects that smelled like strawberries or looked like hamburgers. Some students organized after-school eraser clubs specifically for trading, creating formal meeting times and locations where serious collectors could negotiate deals without classroom interruptions. These clubs developed their own rules, hierarchies, and trading protocols. The variety was remarkable, with erasers featuring popular cartoon characters, food items, animals, and abstract shapes in countless colors and scents. International erasers were particularly prized, offering designs and characters unavailable in domestic markets. The hobby taught kids about supply and demand, negotiation, and market economics, while teachers wondered why students cared more about trading erasers than using them for their intended purpose. Some collections grew to hundreds of pieces, carefully organized and displayed in special containers. The trend eventually faded as new toys and collectibles captured children's attention, but eraser swapping represented an early introduction to collecting culture and peer-to-peer economics. While eraser collectors dealt with physical objects, other hobbyists pursued digital achievements. Mail-in game score challenges connected video game players during the 80s and 90s through magazine competitions. Players mailed Polaroid photographs of their high scores to gaming magazines, competing for recognition and prizes in an era before online leaderboards existed. Top entries were published with the player's name, hometown, and sometimes a photograph, providing brief fame within the gaming community. Mailing photos of your TV screen to prove video game skills was basically social media before social media, except your posts had to survive the postal service. The verification process was surprisingly trusting, relying on photographic evidence that could theoretically be manipulated, but rarely was due to the technical difficulty and limited stakes involved. Magazine editors occasionally visited exceptional players to verify particularly impressive claims. Competition was fierce for certain games, with players developing strategies not just for achieving high scores, but for taking clear photographs that would reproduce well in magazine printing. The hobby required both gaming skill and basic photography competence, which eliminated some potential participants who could play but couldn't document. Different magazines featured different games and scoring categories, creating multiple venues for recognition and specialization. Some players became known for particular games or consistently high performance across multiple titles. Online gaming and digital leaderboards eventually made mail-in score verification obsolete, but these competitions represented an important early form of gaming community and achievement recognition that helped establish competitive gaming culture. These hobbies show how creativity finds a way no matter what technology or materials are available. People will always discover unexpected ways to connect, compete, and express themselves.